My name is Judy Showalter, and I'm here today with Alletta Pannill, who is participating in Randolph-Macon's Living Legacy Oral History Project. Mrs. Pannill has been involved in the campus in a variety of functions, coming to the campus as a faculty spouse, and she's also been a student and an alumni, and involved in many, many parts of the campus life. And we appreciate your being with us today and letting us record some of your thoughts about the campus. It is December 18th, 2007. So what brought you to the campus and when did you come?
I was brought to the campus by my husband, a devoted alumnus of Randolph-Macon, in the fall of 1947 when he joined the faculty of his alma mater. I was told on that first visit to the campus that I had no choices, that I would love Randolph-Macon, or, fortunately, the problem never came up.
That is fortunate.
It is fortunate indeed. We lived at a block from the campus in very crude circumstances. There were very few places available for faculty members at that time, and we had an upstairs apartment, not really, which is rather like a Neil Simon portrayal. You went up the outside steps into great big rooms with nothing in them. We had no furniture, so we began to collect things with boxes and cinder blocks, except a bed. We had that. Our kitchen was a closet that had been converted into a kitchen. School began about the 13th of September, Ernell's first teaching experience. He taught in what was then the old gym. It was a tiny little, the first gym, I am told, on any Southern college campus. The gym was no longer used as a gym. Alumni gym had been built. That little building had been divided into classrooms.
I didn't know that.
And the partitions were about this thick, so that all these classes were actually going on at the same time. He began by being an assistant to his former professor, George Terry. The plan being...
So that was religion?
Bible.
Bible, okay.
Bible. The plan was, according to President Moreland, that he would serve in that position for 2 academic years. Following those 2 academic years, he would return to Duke University to work for his PhD in philosophy, return to create a Department of Philosophy for Randolph-Macon. So the first 2 years were very happy years. I found that I could have a part-time job in the Walter Hines Page Library. The remuneration for that work was 40 cents an hour. However, I did get to know Flavia Owen, which was one of the most successful acquaintances of my life. Miss Maggie Tucker was also a worker in the library. Miss Maggie was of a famous Ashland family. She was unmarried, and at least to me, she was a very old lady. She loved to tell semi-risque stories. We got along fine. So for those 2 years, I worked in the library, and Burnell became already a very famous teacher with Bible studies. We left in the fall of 1949 to return to Duke University. Burnell had a scholarship. I, having had all that wonderful experience in the Walter Hines Page Library, found that I had a very fine job in the main library of Duke University, so that I thought I had moved up considerably in the world. It was a very busy time, of course, and we missed Randolph-Macon, but there was something exhilarating about Duke University. We had 2 years of classwork and library work. Burnell did superior work in his classwork. However, we found that he could not complete his dissertation in the 2-year period, so we asked for an extension of an added semester. The last semester we were there, I did not work. I resigned from the library and just had a good time with my senior husband. Burnell was elected to in-course Phi Beta Kappa at Duke University. He received his degree in June of 1943. We returned that fall to Randolph-Macon, and he began to establish the first philosophy department of Randolph-Macon. It was an extremely exciting time. We returned to the campus to find that what had been a block long, as on the map, series of old houses on Henry Street were gone. One had been turned around and moved to the street behind.
Yeah.
One had been moved across campus to College Park. In their place stood Blackwell Auditorium. First time we had seen it was when we came back. Ultimately, Duncan Memorial Church was built. That took care of that hall. Across the street, across Caroline Street, on the corner, much to our delight, was Fox Hall, in which the philosophy classes would be spent as the department developed. Across the street, sort of behind Blackwell, there was a little tiny house that had been moved from where Fox Hall was. This little house had been, I think, either a carriage house or a servant's quarters. It was very tiny. There was an apartment upstairs, again. There was an apartment downstairs. Downstairs was already taken. Upstairs was not. That's where we lived. There was an inside stairway this time, however, so that we could go in, go up. You entered the main room, which perforce was the dining room. No other way. There was a tiny little closet kitchen off the dining room.
Another closet, huh?
Not as big, not nearly as big as this room. You go through a little tiny hallway, and the other room had to be the living room. Off the living room was a tiny bathroom, connected. The next room, the last room of all, was a great big room, which had to be the bedroom. So that's what we had. We were, however, right across the street from Fox Hall. Very shortly, the campus was far more important than the apartment was. For him, of course, as well as for me. That began a long career of absolute perfection. There were many problems. Burnell was asked to do many, many jobs, in addition to teaching 5 courses, committee work of all kinds. And we were continually approaching Dr. Moreland to see when that promised apartment or house would be available. The answer always was, as we came to expect, Oh, you're on the list. You're the next one on the list. You're number one on the list. Okay. The list kept changing. And somehow we weren't on the list. So in summer of 1955, we decided it was time to take action. So we borrowed enough money from Randolph-Macon to buy the land in College Park on the Randolph Circle. It was not in town then. It was an extension of town. Our address was not a town address. But our house was begun in July of 1955, and it was completed in December. So we moved in a pickup truck. Someone who was working on campus took us over, and we moved into our own quarters at 103 Randolph Circle. And there we lived until 4 years ago. Now, I can begin to tell you all kinds of memories.
Feel free.
I would like to go back, though, and tell you something about the staff of the college when we first came. President Moreland had been president, I think, for about 4 years when we came here, because he was president on Burnell's senior year, 41. T. McNider Simpson was dean of the college. Sam Hatcher was treasurer. You've heard of Sam Hatcher?
Yes, we've heard of Sam Hatcher.
There was a Dr. Bullington, Dr. Keeble, Dr. Updike, Dr. Haley, Dr. Miller, Schuyler Miller.
Oh.
He had come just before we did, but he was here. Stanford Webb, T. McNider Simpson, who was dean and taught math. Gurlette Simpson, who taught English. Mr. McNeil, who taught math. Okay. George Terry, who taught Bible. Dr. Bowen, who still was teaching Latin before retirement. Dr. Fox had been the history teacher, but had been killed in a bus accident in 1948. Mabry, Dr. Mabry, was in history, and Dr. Ehrlich Smith was in education. He retired soon after we got here. And then, shortly, these men were the stable, fantastic members of the faculty, had been for some years. And then not after they left, but following them came the new ones, the Panills and the Haskers and I have the list of them here.
And who
also
came?
Who came? Well, Burnell Pannell, Carl Baskin, John Longacre, Dick Hasker, Bouldridge, Dal Wooten, Robert F. Jones, Noble McEwen, McConnell, sociology, and Hugh Stevens.
Hugh Stevens was athletics.
He was the coach. I don't recall the names of the coaches. Burnell could give them to you. I don't recall the names of the coaches at that time, but they were, we did have a football coach and a basketball coach and a baseball coach, even before Stevens came. But the new ones came in several years after that. So this was the college. And Dr. Moreland's avowed intention at this particular time was to try to get essential buildings built but most of all, to try to build the faculty. He wanted to be a part of Randolph-Macon, to be a stable, full-time, forever faculty.
Oh, dear.
Oops, I did it.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to turn it back on now.
Okay.
Now, after we came back in '53, we became a part of a small faculty, still a small faculty. All of the faculty lived right in this community. We were a very close group of people. We were friends, we were acquaintances. We all knew each other. There were at that time about 300 students on campus, men. We knew them, and they knew us, and it really was, as Randolph-Macon claims to be, a family, a community, which was a little bit set apart even from Ashland in those days. For instance, if someone had asked me from away if I lived in Ashland or Randolph-Macon, I would have said Randolph-Macon. We used the Ashland post office and the grocery stores, and naturally, but we were Randolph-Macon more than anything else. There were many clubs among the faculty members. There were bridge clubs, and we had frequent bridge parties and various. You can imagine how difficult it was for the panels to entertain in their 3-room upstairs oil circulator heater, but at least we didn't have to carry in coal this time as we had the first time. I have all of that material in place in a memory form, which you may have someday.
Wonderful.
President and Mrs. Moreland were exceptional people, both of them. They were a pair together, just as I think we were. She worked as hard for Randolph-Macon as he did, in addition to having 4 girls, and by herself maintaining her house and her garden. She had no assistance whatsoever. If something went wrong in the bathroom, she tried to fix it, or else she called somebody from in town. She was always charming, so warm and friendly. She would often have, since we had no cafeteria, no food service in those days, she would often have hot chocolate sandwiches for students on Sunday night. And we were often, Vernell and I were often the ones who went over to help serve the hot chocolate and the sandwiches. Food service was a problem in those first years. Food service was provided by certain ladies in Ashland, ladies of consequence, who served meals to students in their homes. Some were very elite for those who could afford it. Some were not so elite for those on lesser circumstances. But it was a very unique situation. One which students, those who are left from those days, remember with pleasure. Vernell had his meals with a lady called Mrs. Pollard. Her domicile was not fancy at all, but she was a gracious, lovely lady, and I came to know her after we were married and I came here. We found that as a small group, there was a special enthusiasm among those of us who were part of the faculty. And I simply must mention the fact that the gentlemen whose names I mentioned as being here, all were married, except Robert Epps Jones, I think, of that early one. And their wives were models for me. They were elegant, they were accomplished, they were models to be followed as closely as I possibly could. They were so wise, so gracious, and so much a part of Randolph-Macon in the grand dame feeling that I felt grateful to every one of them, and learned to watch them and to try to speak when spoken to and be careful of things I said and did. I belonged to the Women's Club of Ashland for a brief time. It was an experience I shan't forget. I did it with fear and trembling because it was an extraordinary club. I think it was founded actually by faculty wives for their own entertainment and edification. It was a literary club which met once a week during the months of October through April. There were, I think, 30 members. 30 members were the limit. One was invited to become a member, and one was required to do one original research paper to be presented to the group each year. It was a wonderful experience, and I was a member for 5 years. But I soon found myself with so many activities, truly, that I couldn't manage to do all of them. And that was when I reluctantly gave up. All during this period, Randolph-Macon was trying desperately to raise money, even to the point of individual professors such as us going out on Sunday mornings to churches wherever we could find them, Methodist churches, representing Randolph-Macon with a sermon, of course, by Burnell, and seeking support. And successfully, in small increments. We did not then, at that time, look for millionaires. $100 was a marvelous gift in those days. But that took a lot of time. And Burnell was often asked to speak to groups off campus and night meetings, and Mary Washington, for instance, or even at Fort Lee and places like that. And that took a lot of time and energy, and I was mostly with him. So something had to be given up, and I gave up the Women's Club. I wrote 4 papers, presented 4 papers. I was elected secretary, and at that point I decided it was a good time to stop. Papers were on Victoria Woodhull, the Golden Kingdom, which is about a beehive, the workings of a beehive. Queen Victoria's favorite clergyman, and the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay. So those were my 4. Are we back on again? All right. Any questions?
I want to go back a couple to where you were talking about the dining hall. So we had heard that from last week. The boarding houses then, I mean, were they scattered throughout town, or were they mostly in one area?
There was one where Methodist Church is, where Duncan Memorial is now. That was one. There was one way down the railroad track. They were scattered.
They were scattered.
I guess there were maybe 5 of them. And in most of them, many of them, the student did some work for the housekeeper as part payment for his meals in those days.
Makes sense.
It was their own. And they were given, on weekends, they were given a bag supper on Sunday night by their hostess. And that was the reason Mrs. Moreland often had parties.
And the president's house was on the other side of the railroad tracks, right? The Morelands lived...
The Morelands lived in the president's house.
The one we now call the president's
Yes.
house. Okay, so that had been built.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, that was built by someone else
Mm-hmm.
and acquired by the college for the president's house.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Dr. Blackwell had lived on the other side of the tracks, and I wasn't sure when the president
Dr.
moved to this
No,
side.
Dr. Blackwell, Dr. Blackwell was over there,
Mhm.
but that was his personal house
Okay.
when he was president.
Okay. I
And the
didn't know
college
that.
acquired that later,
Okay.
after his death.
Didn't know that. I thought the college had
Mhm.
provided that for him.
And made it into 2 apartments. Two apartments.
We're sensing a theme here.
But we have a happier thought here. The second year of my first 2 years here, Gerlette Simpson and Dorothy, his wife, were living on the top floor of Blackwell House. He wanted to go back to the University of Virginia to finish his degree. But he did not want to give up his apartment, which was quite elegant. Outside stairs, but with a roof over. So he said to us, they said to us, you have only 1 year before going back to Duke. How would you like to leave your cold water flat and occupy ours, take care of ours while we are gone? You can imagine the answer was a resounding yes. And they wanted to leave all their furniture, and of course we would pay the rent and help keep the furnace going. Jack Roberts and his wife, did I leave him out? Jack Roberts and his wife lived downstairs. I sure did.
And what? The name is familiar, but I can't. What did he
Yes.
teach?
French.
French. Okay.
They lived downstairs. So anyway, we moved upstairs for our second year here, and it was really quite nice. Yes, he lived across the track. So Burnell came across the track, and I came across the track to do my library work. But that was nice. We enjoyed that. It was very beautiful. It now is, of course, the treasurer's office. Still a beautiful building. Have you been in that recently? Oh,
I
you
don't-
really should.
I don't think I've ever been further than the front hall to pick up a paycheck.
It's beautiful. It was quite a lovely home they had. Where was I? Who knows?
Who knows? We had been talking about the women's club.
The what? The food service. The food service. Okay. I don't remember when the dining room was built, but it must have been about 56 or 7, somewhere in there. It was built this still exists. The building still exists. It's the exercise room for the athletic teams. Okay. And we had the alumni gym then, in which we all went to games, and the faculty sat together. There was barely space, between the court and the first sets. And on the railroad track, you go by the gymnasium to the end of the street, and on the railroad track north, there were those science buildings, which Mr. Wernham talked about. 3 science buildings. 2 of which were destroyed, and 1 was refurbished.
Okay.
Okay.
Three. There was Petty John, Case Armistead, which is still standing.
Don't remember the name of the other one.
Okay.
There was chemistry, biology, and physics buildings. Wash Frank Hall was where it is now. At that time, it contained the administration office, the president's office, the dean's office, the treasurer's office, and until recently the library was there. When the library was first built, you'll have to get that date, I don't remember it. It was really operated by Nancy Sidner Haley, who was Mrs. Joe Haley. And the books were gradually moved there from Wash Hall. The two downstairs rooms were used as classrooms. There was also the old chapel, or then it was at that time the chapel and Duncan Memorial Church, which was upstairs. Of course, you know the story of that, I'm sure.
Which story?
Well, there are many,
That's just
many stories.
Many
of
stories.
that,
What do you
yes.
consider the story?
Well, downstairs there was an auditorium, not much larger than these two rooms. It was the auditorium for everything. Speakers, chapel talks, everything. You entered the west door. There was a vestibule, and then the auditorium, two doors on each side. Went up the curved stairs, and that was Duncan Memorial Church. Many, many times during those first 2 years, Burnell made speeches in there because you had to go to chapel twice a week. And sometimes the only person who was willing to do the speaking was chosen. The students had to sign honor slips that they had been. That was easily avoided in many ways, as you can imagine. Upstairs, I was a member. Burnell being a member of the Virginia Conference, I was a member of Duncan Memorial. Taught Sunday school, which was held in a little annex, which became the Alumni Center at one point.
Okay.
Okay. And then, just north of the library, in a little bitty spot there, was the old gym that I just referred to, which was unfortunately demolished in order to fix a wing on the library for the president's offices. Oh, okay. 1960 was a tumultuous year on the campus, as it was on most campuses. By this time, our student enrollment had grown 800-900 because the veterans were coming back. And with the Veterans Bill of Education, they were coming back to Randolph-Macon. Most of them were married. There was no place for them to live, except for the fact, or thanks to the fact, that the Army was selling many of their wooden quarters, barracks quarters, to anybody who wanted to buy them. Randolph-Macon bought a dozen, I'm sure, and placed them down Henry Street in the area in which we now have the dorms. But they were very clumsily put together, very rustic. And that's where the married students lived. Each one had a little barracks quarters. By that time, in 1955, Dr. Moreland had asked Burnell, please to become Dean of Men, continue his teaching of philosophy, but have an assistant because Gurdett Simpson was leaving to become president of Mary Washington, and Mabry was to become dean of the college. The dean of men's position at that moment was very crucial.
I can turn it back on.
Dr. Moreland came to both of us and said, I hate to ask you to do this. Your value as a teacher is perfect. But I need you in the dean's office. It will be difficult for both of you to have this, but I need you. Now, Dr. Moreland knew how to phrase his needs. Mm-hmm. He also knew how, by that time, we felt about Randolph-Macon. We accepted. Therefore, as that tumultuous period and the students' numbers grew, he had that responsibility as well as his philosophy teaching. I felt a great deal of sympathy for the wives of the students. Most of them were working because they had to work. I was not employed at the time. I was working, but I wasn't employed. I felt that it was my pleasure and responsibility to do whatever I could to make the girls feel at home. I would frequently invite them to our home, our new home, for visits in the evening, for cookies and punch, chocolate, whatever, tea, and let them talk about their problems and compare them with my problems that I had known in student life days. It really made a great deal of difference to me, and I hope to them. They attended graciously and were wonderful. It was also an avenue for us to find out many things that were going on that needed to be known by the Dean of Men. Probably you've heard the story about the poker game.
But tell it.
Burnell knew that there was on campus what was known as the floating poker game, that they had secret meetings. There was a group of men, and they were men at that time, who met once a week and played poker for money. One night at one of my parties, one of the girls said, this is getting to be a problem, truly, because our income is very limited, and John loves to play poker, but he isn't really a winner. You think there's something that might be done to curb that? We don't want to, let it be known by the legal authorities. I said, well, I expect we might work out something. And she said, well, the next time there will be a party scheduled, a game scheduled, I'll find out where the game is to be played and let Dr. Pannill know, which she did. The game was played at a different place each time. That particular night, Burnell knew where it was to be played. So he went over and knocked on the door, and someone inside said, "Who is it?" He said, "Dr. Pannill." The voice inside said, "Oh, sure, come on in." But that was the code word for the night. At least for a time, the floating poker game stopped.
Well, that's good.
Very good.
There are all sorts of ways of learning things, you know, when you need to know them. Another, well, during this time on the campus, there were many occasions when it is, I think, true that the respect the students had for the Dean of Men and the Professor of Philosophy helped him in very, very crucial circumstances. When he agreed to become Dean of Men, he said to Dr. Moreland, "I want your promise that when I feel that I must go back to full-time teaching, I will have your approval." And true to his word, he accepted that. And in early 1960s, he became head of the department again. Not that he'd ever given it up. But during that period, the Department of Philosophy had developed into such an important part of Randolph-Macon that it was very difficult for me to have the era end as it did at such an abrupt way without the opportunity of having continuity in place.
Turn this back
I
on.
tried to do here, and I'm
Yeah.
not a map drawer at all. This is England Street,
Okay.
and we lived right over here. This was a business of some kind, a wooden shop of some sort.
Okay.
This was a house, which is now a sorority house. That was Dr. Day's original home.
Okay.
Dr. Day.
Mhm.
Okay. He had since built a big house here, which is now the admissions office,
Mhm.
and was living there when we came here. Let me put this on. It's all right, I have it. So he was living here when we came here.
Mhm.
But here's where all the houses were.
Okay. Yeah,
And
where
this-
the church in Blackwell
where the
is
church
now.
and now Blackwell.
Right.
are.
Because one of the black houses got turned around
Around
and put
here.
on Taylor Street, and
And
we
this is
just tore
McNeil.
that one down.
We
right,
just
the
saw that
McNeil
one.
house.
McNeil House. This one, the big one, which was Sam Hatcher's house, was moved all the way across over here to what is now Caroline Circle.
Okay.
Now this map that you have in this book is incorrect, or whoever has it. Shoot.
I don't know if I've looked at it, which is awful.
There's a map in here somewhere. I can't remember where it is. Anyway, it's in there.
Okay. In the current view book.
It's either in the back or the front. I don't remember which. Here it is. Oh,
There.
this is not Macon Circle. Caroline Street comes down to here
Mm-hmm.
and turns. This is Macon. This is Randolph
Right.
Circle, right here.
Uh-huh.
This turns right here
Mm-hmm.
out to the highway.
Right.
This is Macon House
Mm-hmm.
because this becomes Macon Circle. You see?
Yes. Yeah, that is, you're absolutely right.
I
That is
know.
not making... We'll have to let them
Randolph
know that
Circle
the map
goes,
is
or
wrong.
this is the highway.
Mhm.
Randolph Circle goes around to Route 1. Macon Circle goes. There are houses here and
Mhm.
houses here.
Right, and you had a house right
Well, our house
smack
was
there on the corner.
On this circle, right here. And
Say, I remember which one was your house.
Ray Barry lives here on the corner,
Oh, I didn't know that was where the Berries lived.
Mhm.
Okay.
right here. Okay. And this is the science building, of course.
Mhm.
Bob Offenbacher lives right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, we will
All right. Now
tell whoever makes the map they need to correct that.
Yeah, that is really a serious mistake, I think, naturally. Okay. What else was I going to? Oh, and here's where, of course, the houses were for the wives.
Right, the Vets Village,
The
they
Vets
called
Village
it.
was they called it, yeah.
Mhm.
And they had a lot of problems. Like, we can talk about that more. Around here was Thomas Branch,
Okay.
right. The Mitch. Oh wait, let's go back here to Henry Street. This is the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mitchell had a shop here, a woodworking shop. This was not paved at all. He had a little woodworking shop here, and his family lived here in the house that is now a sorority
house.
Chambers Ray lived here in the next house. Oh, there was a house right in here, too. He was the college physician, and his offices were in the house. That is now the home of the fraternity. What is it? The big one with the dome on top.
See?
Where the SAE house is?
Hmm?
The SAE house? The one that burned down and was rebuilt?
That's it.
The
That's
SAE
it. Oh, you got
house.
it? Okay. Then there were several houses along here
Mm-hmm.
that are no longer here. This was the Commons Club. You've heard of the Commons Club.
We haven't heard of the Commons
You
No.
better
Club.
save that for next time.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
make a
Because
note.
I'm just tending to explain this map to you. Okay. We're on College Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
This is Thomas Branch. There was a little driveway up here. Here was the old chapel. Here was
Right.
not the old chapel.
We
The
have,
chapel.
yeah, we have a photograph of the chapel from the driveway, and it took me forever to figure out where that road was.
Would you let me see that at some
It's
time,
upstairs
please?
sometime.
And this was the auditorium
Mm-hmm.
and the church. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Over here, this was all just trees. Over here was Wash Frank Hall,
Mhm.
and then down here were these 3 science buildings.
3, okay.
I'm sure there were 3. Maybe I'm wrong. You better check that.
I know there was Pettyjohn and there was Pace. There may have been a wooden building.
That's it. There was a wooden building because, yeah, that's right. There were the 2 science buildings and a wooden building right here.
Okay.
Because the college eventually acquired this building and made it into 2 apartments. I didn't live there ever, but I did visit there. And the old gym was right here on the street, right here.
The alumni gym.
The alumni, which is now which was the,
Which
then it was the gym.
Right, and which the students think is the old gym when we
I
talk
know,
about the old gym, but it's not.
No, it's not. You know, there really should be a map of the old campus.
It kept changing, but that's one of the
I'm not talking
projects.
about that. I'm talking about one like this.
Right, one of the projects that we're trying to do, we're going through the insurance
Mm-hmm.
reports,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to put together the various campus maps as buildings were added. Because we're finding that the fire insurance reports
Well,
are
that's a good idea.
the
That
best
was
place
the key.
to find them.
That's right. Now here was the library, and which was just called the Walter Hines Page Library. There was a sort of a pathway, a driveway here.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Branch Stone was here.
Mm-hmm.
It was Mary Branch, just as it is now. Here was some sort of an electric mechanism. It was a lost spot. Where the Fountain Plaza now is was nothing. There was a light electric pole there, and some kind of mechanical stuff, but it was not pretty at all. Over here had been built before Burnell's death, the campus center.
Mm-hmm.
So that was here. But that was not here
Right.
in the early time.
Right, that came with the Fountain Plaza and all that.
Here, yeah, when we first came here, there were these houses right along here. Well, where the campus center is now,
Mm-hmm.
and the dining room. And this is where all the faculty, the old faculty, had homes. Full houses, not apartments. So this is where they lived until they retired. And the football field was where it is. It was called the Day Field,
Mm-hmm.
after Dr. Day.
After Dr. Day.
And he built the field house. He paid for the field house that was built.
I didn't know that.
And along the railroad track, there were the houses we've just discussed. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. I'd say it jives with like I said, we're collecting some maps. We're trying to get them all together.
Now, the full houses that the older faculty had, did the college own all of those houses? It did, okay.
Oh, and one other thing. I shouldn't have put Campus Center here.
Mm-hmm.
Back down this way, there was a path, and there were 3 or 4 frame houses which were occupied by fraternities. I know Lambda Chi was one of them, but I don't know what the others were.
I don't either.
And after we had come back, well, we won't go into that now, but I hope I haven't spoiled this by putting that in.
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. We'll be able to tell.
I just had one last question. When we talked to Dr. Wernham, who went to school here in the 1930s, he said students did not study in the library. Now, in the years that you worked in the library, did the students study there, or not really?
Yeah, but now I don't know. In the 30s, the library wasn't here.
Right.
What library they had
Right.
was in Wash Frank Hall, downstairs. And I guess they locked it at night. I don't know.
Okay.
That's before my...
Okay. Now,
knowledge.
when you worked in the library, did the students have space to study there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. In the Wash Frank Library, as it was built, the first floor was study spaces.
Okay.
And there was a second floor that was where the books were shelved. Mm-hmm. And the Methodist room was down that first level, which was sort of almost, it wasn't underground, of course, you couldn't have it underground. On that first level, there was a room set aside as the Methodist room, where what collection they did have, while Methodism was there. The walls of that one side were lined with bookcases all the way to the ceiling. When we came back, and Foxhall was in place, Burnell asked for the bookshelves from the old Methodist room to be put in his office. And so that whole wall was the bookshelves from the Methodist room.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
I don't know what happened to them after that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today, and we will certainly pick this up at another time.